Hello, everyone, and welcome to Off the Wall. My name is Sol, and today I'm going to talk about all the books I read in the first quarter of the year. Remember to like and subscribe for more bookish content on this channel. The first book I read in January was There by Tommy Orange. There is written from multiple POVs from Native Americans who are ultimately going to a powwow in Oakland at the Coliseum, the ballpark where the Oakland A's play. One thing that was very meta about this book is one of the characters, Dean Oxendine, applied for grant money to film Native Americans telling their stories, since most Native stories that are told are from the past, and he wants to highlight the modern Native person. This is exactly what this book does with each chapter. I also learned about something in American history that I did not know about until reading the book, and that is the Native occupation of Alcatraz. The occupation of Alcatraz was a 19-month-long protest from 1969 to 1971 when 89 Native Americans and their supporters occupied Alcatraz Island until the protest was forcibly ended by the U.S. government. Several of the older characters in the book were children on that island, and that was one of the stories that was told. I definitely went online to learn more about this, and this is yet another example of the U.S. education system failing us once again. So many things we should have been taught in school that we weren't. One of the main themes in this book that really struck a chord with me was the theme of identity. One of the characters, Edwin Black, has a white mother and a Native father who wasn't around, and therefore Edwin never knew what tribe he was from until contacting his father as an adult. He would feel not Native enough because of his ignorance of his native side, but not white enough because of the color of his skin. One of his quotes that stuck with me was, "You're from a people who took and took and took, and from a people taken. You are both and neither." Being Latino and Caribbean, and therefore being a descendant of Native Americans, Africans, and Europeans, I felt that. The people in this book are extremely flawed human beings just trying to make it through life. There is tragedy and sadness and hope and love in this book, and through all the flaws, it's truly beautiful. I highly recommend this book. The next book I read in January was Except for Palestine, The Limits of Progressive Politics, written by Dr. Mark Lamont Hill, the host of BET News, The Griot, Al Jazeera's Upfront, and the Coffee and Books podcast, and Mitchell Plitnick, co-director of Jewish Voices for Peace. This book came out in 2021, and the first sentence of the book is, as this book was going to press, Joe Biden had just defeated Donald Trump in the 2020 presidential election, just to give context to when this book was written. In the introduction, Hill and Plitnick argue that Palestine cannot be an exception. They give the example of Trump's remarks on the caravan of immigrants from Central America coming to our southern border, who were painted as criminals and terrorists, and even the suggestion of using live fire to prevent them from crossing the border. Progressives and liberals were rightfully outraged by both broadly painting these migrants as criminals and suggestion of disproportionate use of force against unarmed people. However, that outrage has not been there for Palestine. U.S. policy in Israel-Palestine rests upon decades of decisions that have been supported either through active endorsement or silent complicity by the American left. No American president has been an exception to this. They just haven't. The American political left has normalized a world in which it's acceptable through words and policies to embrace the ethical and political contradiction of being progressive, except for Palestine. They argue that if liberal-minded Americans truly believe our foreign and domestic policies should reflect the values of freedom, justice, and equality, it is impossible to be satisfied with the current state of affairs. We must recognize that we cannot enjoy particular freedoms in the U.S. if our government is helping to deny those same rights to others around the world. If we claim to care about producing freedom and justice around the world, which is often the express basis for American foreign policy, then we must remain morally consistent. Palestine cannot be an exception. One thing that I think is really important in this book is that it's co-written by a Jewish person. In the book, it speaks about how criticism of the Israeli government, which is a freedom that exists in every democracy, has been equated with anti-Semitism. Plitnick is standing proof that Israel and Judaism aren't mutually exclusive. He writes, with the rise of anti-Semitism in the United States, Europe, and elsewhere, Jewish people everywhere need and deserve solidarity with liberals to survive. But if that solidarity comes at the expense of another people, it is ultimately self-defeating. And this book also goes through the history of the relationship of U.S. and Israel-Palestine and the failures of creating permanent solutions. Even though this book was written before October 2023, you can clearly see how what is currently happening came to be and how it's allowed to come to be by the global community. You especially see this in the final chapter of the book, which is called The Crisis in Gaza. Hill and Plitnick wrote, by scapegoating Hamas, who is certainly more than worthy of intense criticism, we ignore the long history of U.S. involvement in the region by both Democrat and Republican administrations. In so doing, we lose our sense of collective responsibility for the current crisis. This book is very informative, very timely, and an important read. Now, on a lighter note, the next book is actually a comic book, and that is Marvel's 1602 by Neil Gaiman. If you haven't yet, go watch Mike's and mine's review of Season 2 of What If. I'll leave the link down below. The 8th episode of that season played off of Neil Gaiman's Marvel's 1602, and I had such a good time with that episode that it made me want to go back and read the comic. I loved it. It was great. Go read it if you haven't yet. The next book I read is from a book club I'm a part of called Be Too Weird, where we read fantasy and science fiction books written by BIPOC authors. Every week we meet up and discuss that month's book. I will leave a link to the Instagram down below if you're interested. Now, have I participated every month? No, I have not, but it's okay. I do it when I can. The book for January was The Jinn-Bot of Shantiport by Samit Basu, and as Ray described it in the Discord, it is delightfully bizarre. The world building in this book was incredible, and I was getting whiplash from the twists and turns. From the synopsis, Shantiport was supposed to be a gateway to the stars, but the city is sinking, and its colonist rulers aren't helping anyone but themselves. Lena, a daughter of failed revolutionaries, has no desire to escape Shantiport. She loves her city and would do anything to save its people. This is, in fact, the plan for her life, maybe before she was even born. Her brother, Bador, I don't know if I'm pronouncing that correctly, is a small monkey bot with a big attitude and bigger ambitions. He wants a chance to leave this dead-end planet and explore the universe on his own terms. But that would mean abandoning the family he loves, even if they do take him for granted. When Shantiport residence tech billionaire coerces Lena into retrieving a powerful artifact rumored to be able to reshape reality, forces from before their time begin coalescing around the siblings. And when you throw a piece of sentient off-world tech with the ability to grant 3 wishes into the mix, none of the city's powers will know what hit them. It's really good, you guys. And maybe my favorite retelling I've read so far, it is a retelling of Aladdin. And most retellings that I've read hit or miss with them, but this one definitely hit. So thank you, Be Too Weird, for bringing this great book into my life. The next book I read is a book I recommended in my Black History Month recommendation video. I'll leave a link to that video down below in the description. That book is Freedom is a Constant Struggle, Ferguson, Palestine, and the Foundation of a Movement by Angela Y. Davis. It speaks on intersectionality and links the incarceration and struggles of Black Americans with the Palestinian struggle. One link being that many police forces in the U.S. are trained by the Israeli military and use the same tactics on people of color in the U.S. that the Israeli military uses on Palestinian people. This book was a collection of interviews, speeches, and essays by Angela Y. Davis, and unfortunately, it's still a timely read. The next book I read is The Last White Man by Mohsin Hamid. Imagine one day you wake up and you're a different race. That's what happens to the main character, Anders. Overnight, his skin turns dark, and the reflections in the mirror seems like a stranger to him. At first, he's afraid to tell anyone and to go outside, but turns out this is also happening to other people. What's interesting about this book is the second he's out in public, he starts to notice things. People staring at him, people making room for him to walk by on the sidewalk, people not looking him in the eye. And he becomes paranoid. He learns what it's like to walk the world as a person of color. His boss even tells him that if that had happened to him, he would have himself. You also see how people react to this epidemic. Grocery store shelves are empty. Theories about a plot to destroy white people circulate online. People stockpile weapons and military gear and whatnot. This book was written in 2022, and the references to the way these peripheral white people are acting was very MAGA coded. And then you have Ona, an old friend and new lover who relearns how to be with Anders, even though he looks different now. Ona, who is dealing with her own issues and who finds comfort in being around Anders. This book is also a father-son story. Anders' father does not like that his son has changed races, and there is a level of unease and grief that his father exhibits throughout the book. His father is also dying, adds even more to that grief, but ultimately he loves his son more than what his prejudices are. Another thing that's interesting about this book is the writing style. Each paragraph is a run on sentence, and because you don't have a period until the end of the paragraph, you feel like you're continually moving forward, and it adds an element of pace to the book. Like the characters are trying to get all their thoughts out before they can't anymore. It was an interesting use of prose. I liked this book, but it is one of those that I don't know if I would recommend because of how weird it was. If you're intrigued, go ahead and check it out. Let me know your thoughts if you've read the book before down in the comments, or if you're interested in reading the book, or if you end up reading the book. I want to know what other people think of this one because it's written well and it's a very interesting story, but it is very weird. If you watch my first quarter of reading plans video, which I'll also leave a link to that down below, you might be asking yourself, did I get to everything? The answer is no. I don't know what it is, but this happens to me every year. I have a fantastic January when it comes to reading, and then I crap the bed for the next few months and become the slowest reader. I started A Song of Wreaths and Ruin by Roseanne A. Brown in February, and I'm still not done with it. And this is a reread of a book I know I like, and is still just as good as the first time I read it. And I haven't finished it yet. I either read a book in a few days or it takes me forever, and I don't know why. I am at the halfway mark, and I should being the operative word, have it done by the end of this month, but we'll see. But for the second quarter of this year, I'm going to try and catch up and probably stupidly add more books to my TBR because that's who I am. Those were the books that I read in the first quarter of the year. Let me know what you've read in these first 3 months and or what you're currently reading right now in the comments below. Like the video and subscribe to the channel if you haven't already. We're so close to 300 subscribers and would love to get there before our 2-year anniversary of this channel. If you stuck through the video, thank you for listening to me ramble on about books, and I'll see you next time.